Love, it can build a family, or it can break one apart. It can turn into loyalty, or into something darker, betrayal, obsession, greed. She was a wife and mother, well into her 50s, but her heart and her desires wandered. The thrill of a new partner tempted her. The promise of financial freedom seduced her. And somewhere between love and hate, between devotion and resentment, a deadly choice was made. They called him Big Daddy, 6'5", 300 pounds of warmth and laughter. A gentle giant adored by his children and grandchildren. But in July of 2018, Gary Farris vanished without a word. This is the farm in Alpharetta, Georgia. 10 quiet acres of horses, chickens, and a long driveway that would lead investigators and a shattered family to human remains burned beyond recognition. What happened here would expose years of marital fractures, secret affairs, and the kind of greed that destroys everything in its path. Welcome to Dark Matters TV, where we walk together through the darkest corners of true crime and human behavior. Here, every story we tell is handled with care, compassion, and a deep respect for the victims and their families, because behind every headline is a life that mattered. If stories like these haunt you, if you believe remembering them helps us understand, and maybe even prevent future tragedies, we invite you to subscribe. Your support allows us to keep telling these stories, to keep the victims' names alive, and to keep uncovering the truths hidden in the shadows. If you're new here, now's the time. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a case. And if you've been watching for a while but haven't subscribed yet, know this: every click, every share, every comment helps shine a little more light into the darkness. Gary Wayne Farris was no stranger to giving. A successful attorney with Burr and Foreman, he was known as the family's provider. Despite his nickname and easy-hearted nature, the Farris marriage had long been strained. Melody and Gary had 4 adult children. Only Scott remained at home, living in an apartment above the barn and working the farm after serving in Iraq. On July 3, 2018, everything felt ordinary. Grandchildren played in the yard. Scott and his cousins ran across the field. Gary was nowhere to be seen, unremarkable, or so it seemed. By the 4th of July holiday, concern was mild. Kids wanted to ride with Big Daddy on the RTV, but he was missing. At around 8:30 a.m. on July 5th, Scott started his day. He checked on the animals in the barn, prepared to leave for his haircut. His mom and sister sat on the porch. That's when history shifted. He learned his father was missing since the previous day. The first thing he did, of course, was to check his bedroom. His CPAP machine was still by his bed. His wallet, always kept on the dresser, was gone. Gary's vehicle's untouched alarm bells began to sound. Gary Farris wasn't just big. He was fragile. Years of smoking, a constant habit of guzzling Mountain Dew, and mysterious health spells had left him vulnerable. Episodes where his strength would vanish without warning, leaving him weak, disoriented, even bedridden for days. No doctor could ever explain them, but the family had learned to live with the fear. What if one happened when no one was around? That was the thought clawing at Scott's mind on July 5, 2018. As he scoured the 10-acre farm, every rustle in the bushes, every patch of thick grass felt like it might conceal his father, collapsed, confused, maybe even dying. The property was big enough that someone could vanish for hours. It had happened before with wandering animals. Why not a man struggling with his health? With every unanswered call, panic set in deeper. Was Gary lying somewhere in the woods? Had he fallen in a ditch? Could he even cry out for help? The silence pressed heavy against Scott's chest. And then his mother's voice. Urgent, shaky, calling his name from behind the barn. Scott ran. He didn't expect what he was about to see. He thought he'd find his father alive, weak, maybe hurt, but alive. Instead, he found the unthinkable. Behind the barn, near a crude burn pile, lay something so horrific it didn't seem real. Charred fragments, ash clinging to warped metal, the faint, unmistakable outline of bone. It was his father, the gentle giant they called Big Daddy, reduced to fragments in the very soil he worked and loved. 10 acres had hidden him, until that moment. Scott's world collapsed in an instant. What began as a search for a missing father became the discovery of a crime scene. A murder so personal, so deliberate, it could only have come from someone close. As we try to piece this mystery together, one haunting question lingers. How could a man like Gary Farris, the gentle giant they called Big Daddy, end up here, reduced to ash in a burn pile behind his own home? Did he collapse from one of those unexplained health spells and somehow end up here by accident? Did someone help him? Or did someone put him here? It's almost impossible to imagine, but that's exactly what makes this case so devastating. Because in this family tragedy, everyone is a suspect. This was a man who gave everything to his family, who worked tirelessly to build them a good life. Even when his own marriage crumbled under lies and betrayal, he forgave more than most ever could. And now, that same family, the people he sacrificed for, are left standing over his burned remains, torn apart by suspicion and grief. It's heartbreaking to even consider what Gary's final moments were like, what he might have felt or feared in those last hours. As we piece this tragedy together, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling these difficult stories, and it ensures that victims like Gary are never forgotten. DNA confirmed the worst. The remains belonged to Gary Farris. But at first, investigators considered it an accident, until the autopsy found a bullet lodged inside his rib. This shifted everything. When detectives entered the farmhouse, they didn't find what you'd expect in a violent murder scene. No pools of blood, no shattered furniture, just fragments. A few small drops of blood, scattered on the basement stairs on a doorframe. In the kitchen as well, too little to explain what had happened to a man of Gary's size. But just enough to suggest something terrible had unfolded inside these walls. And then there was the smell. Bleach, lingering in the air, soaked into wood grain. A sign. Someone had tried to erase what had happened here. But bleach doesn't erase everything. It leaves its own kind of fingerprint, the kind only investigators notice. But still not enough to accuse anyone. Piecing the evidence together, investigators believed Gary may have been shot inside the house, then dragged or carried to the burn pile behind the barn. But that theory raised another question. Who could have moved him? Melody Farris, 5'3", barely 130 pounds. Could she have lifted a man twice her size, dragged him across the property, and burned his body alone? Investigators doubted it. But Scott, her son, 6'+", strong, trained in the military, he could have. In a family torn apart by lies and betrayal, suspicion now fell in two directions. Was this the act of a resentful wife? Or a son with his own secrets to hide? Meanwhile, detective and a forensic team uncovered shocking details. Melody had denied any affair, but investigators connected her to not one, but two secret relationships. One with Roy Rusty Barton, the man who later said she told him, he is on the burn pile. The evidence painted a picture of money, mistrust, secret affair, and motives. Melody was the beneficiary of a $2 million life insurance policy. The trial began in October 2024. Prosecutors presented over 1,200 pieces of evidence. Melody faced 5 counts: malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, concealing death, false statement. 3 of Melody and Gary Farris's children, Scott, Emily, and Christopher, took the stand, each recounting years of family turmoil and betrayal. Their voices painted a picture of a marriage eroded by lies and a mother driven by motives far darker than grief. Scott Farris, the son who lived on the farm above the barn, was the first to testify. He described the moment he discovered his father's remains. "I walk up and look, and I start seeing bones," he told jurors, recalling the horror at the burn pile. Scott also spoke about his mother's emotional reaction. "I've seen my mother cry hundreds of times in my life, and when she cried at the burn pile, it seemed fake," he said, noting how incongruent her grief appeared. Emily Farris spoke next. She testified about her mother's 2009 affair with Ted Wiley, one that shattered her parents' marriage and led Gary to file for divorce in 2010, though they never separated legally. Emily described the emotional toll on the family, how her father removed Melody from their joint accounts, yet she still maintained control over some finances. She painted a portrait of manipulation and resentment under the guise of reconciliation. Her testimony illustrated how Melody's duplicity had fueled a deep divide, one that ultimately may have led to the crime. Then came Christopher, the firstborn, who shared how the family was fractured by financial conflicts and mistrust. Although he had disagreements with his father over money, he insisted he wanted justice and fully cooperated with investigators. Chris testified about the unbearable shock his father's disappearance caused and described how his mother never organized a funeral, never publicly mourned, and how the house remained eerily quiet after the discovery. His cooperation helped piece together the chain of events that led to Melody's arrest. In contrast, their youngest, Amanda Bruce, surprisingly differed. She expressed doubt about her mother's guilt and believed in her innocence. She testified during pretrial interviews, but did not testify against Melody at trial. But she said she believes she's innocent until she is proven guilty. These three testimonies formed the emotional backbone of the prosecution's case. Scott's trauma, Emily's insight into family discord, Chris's appeal for truth. Together, they exposed the fractures in Melody's web of lies. No longer just a forensic puzzle, they revealed a mother whose motives were rooted in marital betrayal, greed, and financial control. And while Amanda's loyalty offered complexity, the majority testimony tilted the scales decisively against her. And then came Roy Barton, Melody's secret lover, a man whose very presence in the courtroom was a reminder of betrayal. He wasn't just a witness. He was proof of how far Melody's lies had gone, carrying on an affair while her husband built her a dream farm and a family. Roy's testimony was supposed to strengthen the prosecution's case. At first, he told investigators Melody had confessed before Gary's body was discovered, that she had looked him in the eye and said, "He's in the burn pile." That statement implied knowledge only the killer could have. But in court, Roy changed his tune. Suddenly, he claimed Melody said those words after Gary's remains had already been found, a critical shift that raised doubts about his credibility and his motives. As prosecutors laid out their evidence, one revelation struck the courtroom silent: recordings of secret phone calls between Melody Farris and her lover, Roy Barton. Conversations captured while Gary was still alive. In those calls, Melody and Roy weren't just talking about love. They were planning a future, planning a wedding, discussing how, within 6 months of Gary's death, they'd go public and finally make their relationship official. This wasn't the grief of a trapped wife. It was calculation, cold, premeditated, a roadmap to freedom and a new life, built on the ashes of Gary's. And that plan, those whispered vows of marriage while Gary was still breathing, would become some of the most damning evidence of motive the jury would hear. Still, even with Roy's contradictions, prosecutors had more than enough. Over 1,200 pieces of evidence, 3 children testifying against their own mother, and a crime scene soaked in bleach and secrets. The defense challenged the physical feasibility of Melody, a petite woman weighing around 130 pounds, moving her 300-pound husband alone. Instead, they pointed to suspicious behavior and motive by Scott, who previously owned .38 ammo. After days of testimony and 3 days of jury deliberation, on November 4, 2024, Melody was convicted on all charges. In December, she was sentenced to life in prison, with parole possible after 30 years, plus concurrent 5-year terms for other charges. During sentencing, she again proclaimed her innocence and accused her son Scott of orchestrating the crime. She made a whole 20-minute statement on which she insisted her son Scott is to be held for Gray's death. A man known for his kindness gone, burned on his own land. Family dynamics once hidden, now exposed under the harsh light of truth. In the end, Big Daddy was betrayed by someone he trusted most, his wife. Whether you believe the verdict or not, one thing remains. This tragedy revealed the darkest edges of family, marriage, and obsession. But then leave your thought in the comment section. Let us know what you think about this verdict. Thank you for staying till this time. I hope you already subscribed to the channel. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.